Hi guys, this is class number 2 and it's called Eating Real Food. So this class is going to focus on more practical things, how to apply my nutrition principles to real everyday life with a focus on real whole food. Okay, so let me start with my little disclaimer. I actually kind of promote an 80-20 rule because it's very difficult to eat healthy 100% of the time with no mistakes and no cheating or whatever you want to call it. So an 80-20 rule is what I go by. 80% of the time I try and my best to abide by these healthy nutrition focused principles and keeping my diet really clean, eating right, really focusing on what I'm eating, how much, and 20% of the time I kind of just eat what I want so that it gives you a little wiggle room. It helps you to have that freedom to still include those things that you know are really bad for you into your diet, but because you like them, because you love them. So yeah, it also gives you freedom because sometimes you just can't physically go by those healthy rules because convenience, because you're out of town, because you're not at home, because something came up, and you have no control over it because your budget doesn't allow for it all of a sudden for whatever reason. So that gives you a little wiggle room. The whole kind of point of it though is to compensate later. So if you get to that part of the week where you are gonna, make some compromises on your diet because you have to or because you want to, whatever the case, just make sure the rest of the time, the 80% of the time, you make up for that and you get back to eating right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to keep this simple. I'm just going to try and really give you guys some simple things to go by. I'm not going to make it complicated, or at least I hope I'm not making it complicated. But eating real food shouldn't be complicated. It should be really simple. And the best way to do that is really just to limit packaged food, processed food, and steer clear from those fancy and complex words that you see on labels and packaging. If you limit the amount of packaged and processed food that's in your kitchen, in your everyday diet, it makes things a lot simpler. It makes it simpler for you to figure out if it's healthy or not. It makes it simpler for you to figure out if you were eating right that day. It's just overall more simple. So I don't think it's worth time to go into lots of fancy nutrition words that people use in marketing and on those packaged foods, like to know if it's healthy or not. Like, we see gluten-free all the time. We see natural, healthy, low fat, or lower calorie. What else do we see? Lower sodium, grass-fed, organic. There's lots of words like that that are thrown around on packaged and processed foods. Um, but basically, if it's in a package and if it's processed, it's usually not the healthiest. There are some things that are totally fine and they come in a package and that's just for convenience and they end up being okay. But for the most part, you don't want the majority of your diet coming from a box, a bag, a package with a label and a list of ingredients. So it's just easiest to choose foods that look like their natural state. So meat, potatoes, vegetables, those are all things that don't come in packaged, processed forms. They're just like how they are as they come from nature, right? So those they don't come with like a list of ingredients. It's just what it is: a potato, rice, vegetables, meat. It's just like natural raw food, right? So food like that, that's in its natural state, no matter what food it is good. It's healthy. So I don't want you to think, well, how do I know if this vegetable is good or if this type of meat is good? If it's natural, it's probably good, okay? There are a couple of exceptions to this, though. Soy and sugar. So soy is a plant. It's natural, right? It grows in the ground, but it's actually not good. um, it has been around for generations and generations, but the thing is that ancient cultures that survived on it and included it as part of their diet, for some reason knew to only eat it fermented. So, and they only ate it in small amounts back then. They never had like a big bowl of edamame or uh, I don't even know what else, or tofu, yeah. They would have it as a small condiment on the side, and it was naturally fermented, which really changes what it's made up of and really changes its properties. So soy ends up having, I guess, a lot of negative health consequences when it's eaten in large amounts and for a long period of time. So something that you have every day or every week, just something on a regular basis that's eaten for a long period of time is like soy, can have negative consequences. So soy is actually in a lot of packaged and processed foods. It's in the form of soybean oil, and also there's another word that I'm trying to think of, I can't think of right now. But it's in a lot of packaged and processed foods. So if you just look for the word soy in the ingredients list, you'll most likely find it in tons of those packaged and processed foods. Of course, it's always available as soy milk. And then I said edamame and tofu. It's just not the healthiest thing to eat. So steer clear of that. Another natural food that's not good for us is sugar. White sugar comes from either sugar cane or sugar beets, and both of those things are natural. They grow in the ground, and it's completely natural. The thing is that white sugar is extremely processed, and when eaten in the amounts that most Americans eat it, it's extremely inflammatory to the whole body. And we usually eat it every day, whether we realize it or not. It's even added to things like peanut butter and our regular sandwich bread. They have sugar in it. It's added to all of our cereal. It's in tons of condiments, even ketchup sometimes. So sugar's in everything, and because of that, it's such a problem. Also because, like I said, how refined it is. So back in the day, if they were harvesting sugar cane, they didn't end up having white table sugar at the end, So a more unprocessed version of that, or a less processed version of white sugar is something called sucanat. It's a big word. It's something that you probably not heard of much. So sucanat, sucanat. And it looks like really coarse brown sugar. So it's just sugar cane that hasn't been processed. It has all the minerals still left in it, the minerals that are naturally found in sugar cane, and it hasn't been exposed to bleach to make it white. So yeah, it's just if you have the option to get sucanat, that's a great sugar option. It's still, of course, you eat too much of that unprocessed brown sugar called sucanat, you're still going to have the same problems as you do with eating too much white sugar. So, anyways, with all that said, we're trying to keep it simple from here on out. I'm going to talk about how to do that. And like I said before with the 80-20 rule, it's very difficult to afford this all the time. It's unfortunate that sometimes it's more expensive to buy the real food, the whole natural food, than it is to buy the packaged process. Sometimes. So in those cases, you do what you can, and it's very difficult to afford all the ideal quality foods like organic, grass-fed, not processed. It's difficult to afford that all the time. It's also difficult to find that sometimes, especially with our busy schedules. It's difficult to buy those foods and have time to prepare it. So this isn't 100% feasible all the time. So that's why we have this 80-20 rule, right? Okay, moving on. So in light of keeping it simple, let's look back at how people used to eat. So 100 years ago and more. The rest of this talk, we're gonna focus on how people used to eat back then. Because with those principles, it really teaches us how we should be eating now. Back then, they didn't have processed and packaged foods. They grew everything that they ate themselves or nearby farms. They didn't have the luxury that we do of convenience foods. And they also didn't have all the diseases that we are dealing with today. Chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease, obesity. They didn't have any of that back then. So I feel like it makes sense to look at how they used to eat back then and try our best to use that to make our diet look as most like that as we can, and use it as an example and what we base our diet principles on. All right, so how did people used to eat? Like I said, they didn't eat unprocessed, unpackaged foods. And some examples, I think you guys should take a few seconds here and throw around some examples of how people used to eat back then. What did they used to eat? All right, so some benefits of not eating the unprocessed, unpackaged foods. They weren't exposed to all the preservatives that we have in our foods. They didn't have any synthetic vitamins that were added to their foods. No food colorings, no food additives, no thickeners. So there's lots of words we see on the ingredients list of the processed packaged foods today, like carrageenan, soy protein isolate, folic acid. That's a synthetic version of folate, which is the natural one in our body. What else? Monoglycerides, you name it. Red food dye red number 40. There's so many things like that that are in our list of ingredients today. And all of those things that aren't natural, those synthetic chemicals, those are things that are not well metabolized by our body. Our body basically doesn't know what to do with them, and they actually end up being stored in our body. And they get stored in our fat cells, and they become toxic over time. So it's very actually well known in the medical and nutrition community that our fat cells and fat stores in our body contain those toxins from those unnatural things that we eat and ingest, even things that are in like body lotion, anything you put on your skin. It goes into your bloodstream and then gets stored into your cells. Our bodies don't know what to do with it, therefore they can't really excrete it and get it out because it doesn't have a way to metabolize it. Therefore, you kind of want to limit what your body is exposed to as far as unnatural toxins like that. If you can limit it in any way, in any form, that's always a plus. All right, so again, back then, how did they used to eat? They all ate organic. They didn't call it organic, they didn't know what that meant because all food was just organic by definition. So by definition, meaning there's no pesticides. That's what organic means. It just means that no pesticides were applied. Back then, they had small farms. They had lots of different things growing on one farm. They didn't have just a farm full of potatoes or just a farm full of corn. They had the potatoes, the cabbage, the carrots, the wheat. They had everything growing on one plot of land. So therefore, pesticides weren't even needed because it's a lot easier to not have the problem with pests if you're growing multiple things on one plot of land versus a huge farm of just potatoes, for instance. Okay, so unfortunately, like I said, organic tends to be more expensive today. We don't have that luxury of just walking outside. Most of us don't have the luxury of just walking outside and grabbing our head of cabbage and potatoes that are organically grown in our little farm outside. And because of the way that the government controls or is involved with the food supply and the big food manufacturers here, organic is more expensive. It's more expensive because the farmers have to pay fees to get the organic certification. It's more expensive for lots of other reasons. Anyways, all that just to say, if you do see something that's organic, that's what it means. It doesn't have pesticides. So it contributes less to the toxins in your body, right? But in the same sentence, I want to add that just because um, it says organic on a package, on a bag of something, doesn't necessarily make it healthy. So there can be organic cookies, they're still cookies. So they're still very processed and packaged and still have sugar and probably other ingredients in it that you don't want to eat. But all it means is there's no pesticides in the ingredients that were used. So it doesn't mean that it's healthy necessarily. One good option to keep in mind, though, if you are interested in buying more organic stuff, are farmers markets. So when springtime comes around, which is really soon, um, look for those farmers markets around you. You guys should talk among yourselves, even press pause on this and start talking about it for a little bit. But there are farmers markets around you guys, and a lot of them do sell, or a lot of the vendors there, the farmers do sell some organic produce. They may not necessarily have the organic certification. They might not have that organic stamp that we're used to seeing on products. But that's usually because these small farmers, like I said, it's more expensive for them to do that, for them to get the actual certification. So a lot of them, if you just simply ask the farmers, hey, is your stuff organic, or did you guys spray this with anything? They will totally be upfront with you most of the time. I've always had someone respond really positively and honest to that. Some farmers even will go as far to say, oh, yeah, those apples aren't sprayed, but that lettuce is. Or, yeah, the apples are sprayed this month, but next month they won't be, because it's just different with the seasons. So some months they need to spray things and others they don't. So you can totally just ask them, and it's usually much more affordable at farmers markets than it is in the store. I do actually all of my produce shopping at the farmer's market unless it's something that's not grown locally and I have to get it in the store. So it's just cheaper at the farmer's market usually. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But before I do, I want to just touch on one more thing about processed and packaged food. So to give you guys something more practical to refer to. All right, so like I said, there's some processed and packaged food that most of it actually will have a long list of ingredients, right? And most of it is not healthy. We don't want it to be the majority of our diet. So I just want to give you some comparisons as far as ingredient lists. And I'm emphasizing the ingredients list a lot if you haven't noticed. I don't even care about what it says on the nutrition facts label. All those numbers doesn't really mean much to me. It's too difficult to explain and understand. It takes too long to figure out when you're standing there in the store. So what I focus on is the ingredients. And then healthy portion sizes, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So there are always usually a couple processed and packaged foods that are a better option than others. If you're gonna go and get something that's processed or packaged, or just some, basic pantry staples, obviously they come in a package. So it's just helpful to know what to look for and to know that there are usually some other healthier options out there. Okay, so I hope some of you brought some favorite pantry staples or snack options that you guys have that's in a package or a bag or whatever. So go around and read the ingredients list from it. Put me on pause and do that, and then we'll come back to this. All right, so I just want to give you another quick rundown of some totally different options for snack options or basic pantry options, right? So, okay, the chewy granola bars, right? The like chocolate chip chewy Quaker granola bars that tons of kids eat. So I'm looking at the ingredients list right now, and it's like a paragraph. So I'm just going to read a few of the words because it'll take too long to read the whole thing. And then I'm going to do the same for a couple more products and then compare with some better options that are available for you. All right, so it has, let's see, granola, which I expect, right? Malted barley extract, soybean oil, there's your soy, whole wheat flour, sodium bicarbonate, soy lecithin, there's more soy, non-fat dry milk, corn syrup, let's see, palm oil, chocolate liquor, soy lecithin, more soy, peanut flavored chips with kernel and palm oil, partially defatted peanut flour, lactose, dry whey, dextrose, soy lecithin, more soy, glycerin, sorbitol, artificial flavor, BHT, it's a preservative, and citric acid, and there's like a whole bunch more stuff. Okay, so it's a really long list, right? Not so good. But this is a better option that I eat like once a week probably, and always have on hand if I'm traveling, or there's always usually one in my purse. Anyways, it's another like chocolate chip cookie bar that you can just grab and it tastes good. And there's lots of different flavors, and they have it at Target and other grocery stores. All right, so here's the ingredients. Cashews, dates, semi-sweet chocolate chips made with only sugar, coconut butter, and vanilla. Sea salt, and that's it. It's like a few ingredients, and it's all whole food, real ingredients that you recognize. And there was actually no soy. So that's cool. It has twice the amount of calories as the Quaker Chewy chocolate chip bar, but it's made of more wholesome quality ingredients. You could also just eat half of this if you were trying to cut back on calories. Okay, another example, peanut butter. I mean, everyone has peanut butter in their house, right? Okay, so the Peter Pan brand of peanut butter's list of ingredients is roasted peanuts, corn syrup solids, soy protein concentrate, sugar, hydrogenated vegetable oils, cottonseed and rapeseed. Rapeseed is actually a different name for canola oil. Its real plant name is rapeseed, which is not a pleasant sounding name. Let's see, salt, minerals, and vitamins. All right. So, did you guys know that they added corn syrup and soy protein to that peanut butter? I didn't. So, all right, here's another peanut butter. This is actually from Whole Foods, but this is like the cheapest peanut butter. It's like $2.50 for this at Whole Foods. Dry roasted peanuts and salt. That's it. Not even any oil or sugar added. This is the kind that's natural, and you'll see at the store like the oil is all at the top and the peanut butter's at the bottom. You just have to mix it up with a knife or a big spoon before you put it in the fridge so it doesn't separate again. But just tastes like regular peanut butter. All right. Last thing, another good option for a snack, if you can ever find this somewhere. It's Earth Balance coconut and peanut spread. So the ingredients are pretty simple and fairly good. There could be a couple of improvements, but for the most part, it's very good. All right, peanuts, organic extra virgin coconut oil, which will really fill you up, agave syrup, palm fruit oil, natural flavor, and salt. So I don't really like the natural flavor or agave, but it's fine. And it's in such a small amount, and I don't eat this every day. I eat this like when I'm traveling. So it's a really good option instead of think about what you would normally grab if you were traveling. I don't know, Doritos or a candy bar or a muffin at Starbucks. Any of those. This is a better option than that. It's more filling. It's 200 calories, well, less than. It's 190 calories. But like I said, don't focus on the numbers. Focus on the ingredients, and you'll get much better quality nutrition from that. Okay. So I hope you guys had fun picking apart your snacks and the list of ingredients on those foods you brought in. Before we move on, I just want to finish up with snacks. So to make sure you guys have plenty of options to swap for the unhealthy ones. All right, so go around and list some common snacks that are in your household or that your kids grab or you guys typically go to. All right, so just to add to that, you may have already named these, but I have Goldfish, Cheez-Its, Doritos, or Fritos, whatever chips, fruit snacks, usually really big with kids, yogurt, like Yoplait, Dannon, Chobani, any of those, or like a store brand, Rice Krispies treats, rice cakes, anything like that. All right. Make sure if those are any of those or whatever common snacks you guys have in your household, read the ingredients list, review them, see if there's anything in there that you think is healthy and worth keeping, and if there is, keep it on your list, keep it in your pantry. But if it's something that you think is too processed based on what we've talked about and has too long a list of ingredients, and it's something that you keep in your house often and keep as a part of your diet frequently, you might want to try and find something that you can switch it for that's less processed and more healthy, more quality nutrition. So here are some good options you could change it up with. So plain fruit, veggies, like cut up some cucumbers, celery, carrots, whatever it is that you like baby tomatoes, green peppers. Just find something that you like. For me, it's celery and cucumbers. Peanut butter. Peanut butter is really filling and really nutritious, and if you can buy the peanut butter that's just peanuts and salt, that's great. So you can do apples and peanut butter, celery and peanut butter. Sometimes I literally just stir up peanut butter and a little bit of honey and coconut oil and just have a tablespoon of that because it's really filling. Hummus, again, read the ingredients because some of the brands add some things and then the others are just plain really good ingredients. So always turn that around and compare the brands. Cheese, just a block of cheese, cut it up into cubes. It's ready to go for the week. Put it into little baggies, small amounts. It's again, really filling, whole food, natural. Real yogurt. So there are brands of yogurt that are better than others. There's also brands that have less sugar than others. There's flavors that have less sugar than others. Again, it's a comparison game. So you've got to turn those jars or containers around and read the ingredients to find the one that's the healthiest. So I'll throw a couple brand names out there that I know of. If you see them in your store, Stonyfield is usually a better one. Brown Cow. What else? There's a couple, but those are the most common that I see in the regular grocery stores, unless you're at a natural food store. But again, the flavored yogurts will have more sugar and more things that are unnatural to add the flavor. So an even better option, if you can handle it, as far as taste, is to get plain yogurt and add the flavor yourself with like a teaspoon of maple syrup or honey or even like jam or fresh fruit. So if you can do that, that'd be even better. Otherwise, if you just can't give up your key lime pie Yoplait yogurt, just try and cut it down in frequency. Like instead of eating it every single day for your snack, maybe just cut it down to twice a week or something. Okay, so the other option, obviously these bars, so it's called Lara bars. Those are a really great option. Cottage cheese, hard-boiled eggs are really great because it's protein and fat and it's filling. I'm sure you guys can think of some more options, so why don't you guys take a minute and throw those out there for everyone to benefit from. Okay, all right, so moving on. We have a little bit of ways to go. We're still talking about how did people used to eat, because we want to try to emulate that today because we'll be healthier in the long run, right? All right, so they all ate, like I said, homegrown or local farm-grown food. So that means it wasn't sterile, it wasn't packaged, it was just open to the air and open to bacteria and the soil and whatever. So that's how we find it at the farmer's market today. It didn't get processed in a manufacturing plant before it came to us. And for some people, that's actually really scary. I've actually met people that would prefer to eat canned vegetables over a fresh head of lettuce because they don't trust the lettuce. It could be contaminated with bacteria. So the thing is, people back in the day ate it fresh. They didn't eat anything canned or packaged. They just naturally had fresh food, and it was just exposed to all the elements, right? Sometimes even when I buy stuff at the farmer's market, I'm sure you guys have seen this too, that it'll actually still have some dirt on it. So that's just normal. That's just natural. It's how it's made to be. It's what God intended. And you just simply rinse it off really well. And you actually can benefit from the bacteria that it's exposed to. It boosts your immune system, to be honest. And there's actually a lot of beneficial bacteria that's found in soil that kind of acts like probiotics in our body. So it's nothing to be scared of. One thing I want to mention about farmers markets before I forget, and you guys can talk about this too and share your other tips you have, is that a lot of farmers markets actually accept WIC and SNAP or food stamps at them, and they're usually worth double the amount at the farmers markets versus the store. So it's really something to look into. Not every farmers market and not every vendor at the farmers market. So for instance, I know the one at University of Maryland Medical Center, they have a farmers market once a week. I can't remember the day. It might be Tuesday afternoons, but they always have signs up that they accept WIC and SNAP, and a lot of the vendors there, the produce vendors, do. So instead of using it at the grocery store, look into using it at the farmers market because you'll get twice the vegetables for the same amount of money. All right, another thing people used to do back in the day, they only ate seasonal foods, meaning the foods that naturally grew in that season. And what does that mean exactly? It means they got fresh food all the time. So whatever they ate, it was very fresh. It wasn't traveling from all over the country and losing nutrition during the traveling time because it sat longer. It was local, and therefore it was more nutritious because it was super fresh. So actually, as the oranges or apples sit in the distribution plant in, oranges come from Florida. So as they sit in the distribution center down there, they're actually losing vitamin C the longer they sit. And same with any other produce item. Okay, so another big topic is fermented foods. Now, this might be a very new word for some people, and other people might think that's like a gross sounding word, and a few of you might even actually know about this. So people back in the day used to include fermented foods in their diet on a regular basis, but especially in the winter when they didn't have fresh vegetables. So what is fermented foods? What is fermentation? It's a natural way of preserving the food. However, it does not include vinegar. So that's pickling. So pickling food of vegetables or whatever is different than fermenting it. Pickling uses the vinegar and fermenting does not. It just usually uses salt, water, and that's it. What does it do? Like I said, it preserves it, but it really increases the nutritional value of the food. It boosts the immune system incredibly because it promotes the growth of probiotics like amazingly. And so by doing this, it prevents and treats a lot of GI issues, allergies, autoimmune issues, lots of other things. So some examples of fermented foods. We have dairy and vegetables. So for dairy, yogurt, right? Kefir, if you've heard of that. Also cheese is a form of fermenting food. It's not as beneficial because it's only done for a shorter time, but it's a form of it. So for vegetables, we have pickles, sauerkraut. Basically, you can ferment any vegetable. People do carrots, they do beets, anything. You can make like a slaw out of it. It's just they just make it similar to sauerkraut. So the big thing to remember about fermented foods though, it doesn't have vinegar. That means you will only find it in the refrigerated section at the grocery store, unlike the sauerkraut, for instance, or pickles that do have vinegar in them. Those are in the center aisles of the grocery store that are not refrigerated, right? The other thing about this is naturally fermented vegetables like this are going to be more expensive than the ones that are in the non-refrigerated section. So that means it's actually cheaper though if you make it yourself, and it's really easy. So a thing of sauerkraut like this, the good quality brands are like $7 to $10 for a jar like this, but if you make it yourself, it's only the cost of the head of cabbage. So at the farmer's market, a head of cabbage is like $2, even for like the kind that's not sprayed with anything. So it's basically organic. So you get a whole jar for $2. So you guys can actually look up really easy recipes online of how to make sauerkraut yourself. You could even organize another class day to make it yourselves all together here. I've actually gone to my friends' houses in Guatemala and shown them how to make sauerkraut because it's so beneficial and it helps prevent so many illnesses because it boosts your immune system so much. So the amount of probiotics that you get from fermented foods like sauerkraut is way more you could get in any pill that you get at the store or online. And if you don't know, probiotics are basically just beneficial bacteria. And about 70% of your immune system comes from the probiotics in your digestive tract. So therefore, it's so important to have fermented foods or probiotics as part of your regular diet. So a lot of people just have sauerkraut like on the side as a condiment with their food. Some people really don't like it, but that's really normal and it's okay. Just even if you can get a couple bites in once a day, that's really beneficial. And a lot of people get used to it over time. I mean, my best friend's 2 little kids, they're 2 and 4 years old. They love sauerkraut, the real homemade stuff. And they ask for it all the time and just gobble it up at dinner because it's what they're used to. It's normal to them. They were always brought up on it. So anything's possible. For kids, the trick is to always just keep introducing that healthy food, whatever it is you want them to get used to eating, over and over and over so that it becomes normal to them. They're used to seeing it. They're used to seeing it in their fridge, their pantry. They're used to being offered it and seeing you eat it. So it's just really important to keep offering it and having it available all the time, whether we're talking about vegetables in general, sauerkraut, water, whatever it is you're trying to get your kid to eat and improve their diet with. That's one of the biggest things you can do. All right. Let's see. Anything else I should talk about with sauerkraut? Oh, like I said, there's lots of really easy websites you can look up, like thenourishedkitchen.com. They have a really simple recipe for sauerkraut. Again, it's just cabbage and salt and water. Okay. Next thing about how people used to eat. I'm just going to break it down with the 3 food groups to end this and talk about how they ate each of the food groups. So for carbohydrates, they ate a lot less of carbs than we did. The majority of their diet was not carbs like ours is. So the dietary recommendations for America is that most of our calories come from carbs. And that's just not how it was back in the day. They ate a lot more vegetables than we do now, and less carbs. They also had less available to them, and the thing is, it took a lot longer to prepare those carbs back then than it does now. Now, the most convenient food and the cheapest food we have available to us at any time is something that's a carb. So, chips, pizza, pasta, anything like that. That's the quickest, most filling, most convenient food that we have available to us, right? But back then, it wasn't as simple as that. They had to actually make everything by hand. They couldn't just order a quick pizza. And actually, they did a step more than we do. Like if we are making rice, we just simply boil it, right? Or we have the microwave kind now, right? So what they did back then was not just boil it. They did an even extra step. They used to soak things at least for an entire day in water with some type of acid. So either a squeeze of lemon or some vinegar. They would let it soak in there for at least a whole day. I don't know how they knew this, but that's what they did. And what it accomplishes is a few things. It increases the nutrition value of the item, like if it's rice, wheat, let's see, what else could you do it with? Basically rice and flour. But rice makes the most sense to do because the flour is already processed that we get. They also used to do this with corn. So like in Central or South America, if they were going to make homemade tortillas, they used to get the corn off the kernel and then grind it up and then let it soak before making it into flour and cooking with it. So it increases the nutrition, but it also gets rid of something called anti-nutrients. So basically the opposite of a nutrient. These things are called phytates. And it's not a normal word that we hear, but it exists. And they actually bind up the minerals that we need in our bodies, so we can't absorb them. So phosphorus, magnesium, and calcium that are naturally found in grains, we can't really get it from those grains because they're connected and like locked up to these anti-nutrients, and they just pass through our bodies unabsorbed. So the benefit of soaking white or brown rice is that we get more nutrition because we got rid of that anti-nutrient that had the calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus bound up, right? So it becomes unlocked and we can absorb the nutrient. It also ends up being a easier to digest grain. So brown rice is typically harder to digest. There's a lot of fiber and a lot of other anti-nutrients, so it's kind of rough on the digestive tract, right? But if we soak it overnight, at least, better if it's 24 or 48 hours, but at least we can do is soak it overnight before we cook it. It's so much easier on the digestive system. There's a lot more information about this online too. Just look up soaking grains. Another thing they used to do, which I forgot to mention, is they used to ferment the grains too sometimes before they ate it. So think of sourdough bread. That's actually fermented bread dough, and it rises naturally without adding the instant yeast to it to rise. And that means that because it's fermented, it's more broken down, it's easier to digest, it's more nutritious, it's just less irritating to the digestive tract. The thing about sourdough bread, because I know this is making you all excited, is watch out for the sourdough bread in the stores. You have to read the ingredients. If there is yeast in the ingredients, it's not real sourdough, unfortunately. It just, they like added the sour taste to the bread. So if there's sourdough bread in your store without yeast in the ingredients, it's real. I know that they have a real one at Harris Teeter. The brand is La Brea Bakery, and I only know that because that bakery is right near my house here in LA, and I've looked at the ingredients there at the Harris Teeter in Maryland, so something to consider. Okay, so protein. How did they used to eat protein back in the day? Again, protein is all animal products, so meat, eggs, cheese, fish, any of that, that's all protein, right? So back then, again, it was all fresh, it was unprocessed. That means they didn't have hot dogs, they didn't have sausage unless they made it homemade. What else? They didn't have, they did have bacon. It was homemade, didn't have all the chemicals in it that tend to be in the ingredients at the ones we have in our grocery stores. So again, ingredients list is everything. The meat that you get like at the meat counter at the store, it won't have an ingredients list. So it's just meat, that's it. So it's good to go. But if you're getting a processed meat like hot dogs, sausage, bacon, try and read the ingredients. Compare the brands. Look for the one with the best ingredients list, one that doesn't sound like a bunch of chemicals. Again, if you can't afford that, because those can get pretty expensive, then just try and keep that processed meat as a small part of your regular diet. So if you're used to eating hot dogs, like the Oscar Mayer hot dogs, once a week, maybe try and find an alternative and switch it to just twice a month, for instance. All right. For fat, people back then used to eat a whole lot more fat than we do now. So this whole low-fat diet kick that people have been on here for like the last, 50 years actually. It's been really emphasized the past 50 years. That never was the case. Their fat back then was more nutritious than ours tends to be now, and thus we're paying for the really expensive, high quality kind. It was more nutritious because it all came from animals that were raised in really great conditions, eating only grass, out in the sun. So that meant their butter had lots more vitamin A and vitamin K and vitamin D in it, and so did their milk, their whole milk. There was no such thing as skim milk back then. I mean, they could make their own skim milk, but no one preferred it, that's for sure. Everyone drank whole milk, and everyone ate real butter, and they ate lard, and let's see, they ate real eggs with the yolk in it. They ate meat with the fat around it. They sure didn't cut that off. They ate the chicken with the skin on it. They ate all of that because their diets had a lot more fat in it and a lot less carbs, and they wanted to stay full. They had a lot of hard work to do outside, unlike our desk jobs that we're all used to. So it was more filling, it was more energizing. They didn't snack all day. So their meals really had to stay with them. And if you want your meal to stay with you, you have to have more fat in it and more vegetables for the fiber. The other thing I'm going to say about fat, just to refresh, last class we talked about heart disease and how it's not caused by fat. Just a refresher, it's really caused by inflammation, which is caused by carbs and unsaturated oils that are inflammatory because they're damaged, right? So the saturated fat is actually good for us. That means a breakfast of, for instance, eggs, bacon, and one piece of toast, or eggs, bacon, and like a quarter of an avocado is actually really good for you. And it's something I eat almost every day. My breakfast never has cereal in it, which is only carbs. So good news for you guys. All right, so applying this all today, how do we take all these principles from back in the day and make our plate at every meal kind of look as much like that as we can? We just really need to focus on foods that are natural. Buy less things that come from a box and a bag, and things that don't have a really long list of ingredients when you can. And keep in mind, sometimes eating more natural really is cheaper, and your money can go can last much longer with those natural foods. For instance, potatoes, like a 5-pound bag of potatoes is a lot cheaper than buying like the frozen tater tots or frozen French fries. It's also more nutritious. A dozen eggs, it's a lot cheaper than buying 3 boxes of cereal to last that long. It's more nutritious, it's more filling, it's cheaper. So you get more bang for your buck. I mean, you don't have to buy the cage-free, organic, pasture-raised eggs all the time. If you can just buy eggs versus cereal, that's just a huge, huge step, and it's going to make a big difference in your family's health, in your health, and all the nutrition you're getting. If you can switch from margarine to real butter, huge difference. If you can switch from soda, tons of sugar, to like seltzer water with juice added, for instance, huge difference. If you can switch from the peanut butter with all the long list of ingredients of stuff included in it to regular peanut butter, huge difference. So if you can switch your snacks from like Cheez-Its or Goldfish and granola bars with a long list of ingredients to like cheese, grapes, celery, and peanut butter, that is a big, big difference, and you're really going to feel different. You're going to notice the difference. It's a lot cheaper to buy those snacks than it is the packaged ones. So what's really going to help you guys for this homework right now is write down pick basically a meal, or it's either a meal or a snack that is pretty typical for you that you can improve on. So last time we talked about the portion sizes, improving on the portion sizes, and now we're going to talk about making that meal as natural and like our traditional ways as possible. So write down what you would normally have and then brainstorm with each other and try and find ways to improve it, whether it's coming up with a new recipe so that you don't have to buy your dinner in one big package, or maybe even just taking a trip to the farmer's market and looking for stuff that's cheaper than you're used to buying. All right, so good luck, guys. I hope that really helps. Again, feel free to email me with a list of all your questions, and I'll get back to you.